Welcome to this week's Running Tales podcast, a podcast aimed at telling the extraordinary stories of everyday runners, race walkers and wheelchair racers. I'm Craig Lewis and this week's guest is Nikki Page. She's the founder of Love London Running Tours. Fitness instructor Nikki launched the tours to help people sightsee the fit way. Pregnancy and coronavirus, two things I spoke to her about in detail in terms of recovery, have meant the tours are currently in a hiatus. But Nikki is hoping to bring them back soon. She's also currently training for the London Marathon, but as I found out, has had to defer her entry to this year's race.
So that's unfortunately correct. I've been training now for the London Marathon since October 2019 when I got my ballot place. I was originally training for the 2020 race, which, as we know, unfortunately got cancelled. And I elected to have my place moved to 2022 because I knew that we'd be trying for a baby. So I thought I needed the time in 2021 to allow my body to recover and then focus on this. And it was a really good way of getting back into exercise and also just kind of quite humbling and kind of learning, kind of having to pare back my own expectations about how I wanted to do the race, because pre-baby and pre-COVID, I was super training, very fit, all the time in the world to exercise, and now I didn't have that. And all kind of gearing up for the marathon this October. Unfortunately, I got COVID start of August. Hit me quite bad, obviously not as bad as some people have unfortunately had it, but I didn't exercise for 4 weeks, and so took the decision. I could physically get myself around, I'm sure I have the mental strength to do so, but I really want to give it my best chance in terms of injury and so forth. Assuming you don't get that, I would like the chance to run and do myself proud. So really, really reluctantly, I'm deferring it now to April 23.
COVID and how it's affected everybody.
Yeah.
A range of things, but with runners, it's had its own impacts as well. And while it may mean, because most of us are hopefully reasonably fit to start off with, we didn't end up in intensive care or anything like that. Although, or sadly, some people may have done. Whether it's long COVID or other effects, it does seem to have had an impact. I mean, I know runners who are now struggling with their hearing, for example, or still haven't got a smell back, and bizarrely that can make a difference, or just sadly have an impact with fatigue, which just won't go away and allow them to run how they used to. How has it sort of affected you and slowed down your running journey?
Yeah, so I mean, right now I feel great. I feel like I'm ready to embrace my normal exercise regime again, but it absolutely knocked me for about 3 weeks. I was extremely fatigued. I had a cough initially, but then I found that for most of the day I felt fine cough-wise, but then come early evening, I would feel a real heaviness on my chest and a very irritable cough. And just knowing what I know, because I do have a fitness background, I'm a qualified group fitness instructor, and knowing what I know about the body and about illnesses, I just really want to be sensible. I'm desperate to run this marathon, but I don't want to have the short-term gain to do long-term damage to my body. And reading up, and looking at kind of the recovery from COVID, I think it's massively important to take that time to allow yourself to have, say, a week or so of absolutely no symptoms before you even consider going back to any kind of exercise. I decided, once I felt like I was ready to exercise again, I wasn't actually going to take myself on a run immediately. I was going to do some light weight training. I did body step online at home, because that's a nice workout in terms of it has cardio peaks, but also lots of recoveries, and you can pare it back. So it was a good way of just reintroducing it. But I think be sensible and to understand that if you want, you only have this one body, and we have to look after it for our whole lives.
Yes, it's really interesting as runners. We sometimes rush back into things. There's this kind of mantra which incredibly works sometimes, but it's probably not a bad idea of, I'm going to run it off.
Yeah.
Apply that to a disease like coronavirus as well.
Yeah, you can probably run off a mild hangover, but yeah, you can't run off something like COVID, unfortunately.
Yeah, for sure. And I think COVID obviously isn't the only thing that's impacted your running recently. This one somewhat happier, but you mentioned having a child before. What kind of impact did that have on you, and what's it like? Something I'm never going to know. What's it like to running after having a baby?
Yeah, so I mean, so one of my fitness qualifications is I have a level 3 pre and postnatal qualification. So prior to having my baby, I had all the education, but now I kind of have this first-hand experience of what it's like. And it's pretty humbling. There are some people who can beast mode themselves and they can really prioritize, the exercise. For me, I found I had to really be kind to myself in terms of, you may not be running as fast, you may not have the time, that there's a lot of barriers to exercise. So physically you're very tired. Quite often you've had lots of wake ups in the night. I'm breastfeeding, and so they say with breastfeeding, in terms of say metabolic energy needed just for that, it's the equivalent of walking 7 miles each day. And it's also very thirsty business. So prior to the baby, I used to love waking up in the morning, glass of water, go on a run. I can't do that now. I'm just too dehydrated in the morning. So I have to be really sensible about when is now the optimum time for me to take a run. And then finding actually my optimum time for going on a run isn't always practical because my partner's at work or whatever it might be. I do have a running buggy, so I found that's been quite a good way of fitting in exercise in the day. But it's also really hard because you're running in a completely different way. So you're not able to use your upper body the same way because you're holding onto the handles. You also have, at the moment, my little girl is just under 10 kilos. So you have this extra 10 kilos that you're running with. But just having to look at, okay, how can I fit in running? I no longer, apart from when I was doing the marathon training and having to do at least one long run a week, I can't just go off for 90 minutes as easily. So having to say, okay, a short amount of exercise is better than no exercise, and just getting my mind around that. It's also really important when you're coming back to exercise after the baby, is to understand the postnatal period. So the body has kind of the immediate period, which is from birth up to 6 weeks. And then you have this longer period, which is really up to about a year in terms of the full recovery. And it's really important that you don't just go charging in and exercise straight away, because there's an awful lot of recovery still to be done. In many ways, you are exercising from the start because you have this physical weight of a baby that you have to pick up. You still have to go shopping, you still have to take things out of the car, but you do have to be sensible in your return to exercise. One of the things, even before kind of taking yourself on a run, is to look at re-educating your posture. The center of gravity has moved forward as your body's making space for the baby to grow. Your core strength is very weak because your abdominal muscles have stretched in order to allow the baby to grow. And your pelvic floor has been affected. This is the area that supports your internal organs. And it's important that you're strengthening your core, your back, and the pelvic floor before you start doing any impact exercises. So for me, and again, a bit because of the fitness background, I definitely took it slowly doing that rehabilitation before I took myself out on my first run.
I mean, that's really interesting, and it's probably something at least one half of the population think about enough. And I know that on occasions you hear stories about top level elite athletes, women who come back and have a baby and then win major events again. And yes, my ignorance is going to mean I can't name any in terms of the running world off the top of my head, but the one that I immediately think about is, I think, Serena Williams came back from having a baby and won everything again. It must be just such an incredible achievement, given the changes that go through a woman's body after that time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the thing, like one of the things, even though I've at times been really frustrated at, say, the speed that I'm running at the minute, because I am more fatigued, I'm also very a lot of gratitude for what my body has done. And yeah, I mean, there's other things kind of to take into account. One of, that you don't always think about. So again, if a woman is breastfeeding, she might, for example, find certain stretching exercises or any kind of core strength exercises on her front really uncomfortable. Apparently, there are some exercises where if you have your arms in the air, it can actually lead to the milk being produced at that moment. I've thankfully not that happened to me, but there's kind of just things you have to take into account. You also, for example, might need to buy new underwear because perhaps the bra size is different for a while. I personally didn't have any issues with my feet, but when you are pregnant, you have a hormone called relaxin. What that does, it softens your ligaments and your cartilage, and it prepares your body for the birth. And what it can do for some women, because it's relaxing these parts, they find that their foot size increases, and maybe they've also got water retention and stuff. So some people have to buy new trainers, and just being aware of that in terms of, you don't want to get injured because your footwear is incorrect for you. And just to be aware that things like relaxin, this hormone, it stays in your body. They say on average for up to 5 months after the birth. If you're breastfeeding, it can be longer, and that can have impacts. So it can make you a little bit more flexible than you naturally would be. So when you're stretching, it feels great, but actually, is it doing me good that I'm now stretching like, my hamstring a little bit more than I could comfortably before?
And is the overall message, I mean, similar to recovering from something like COVID, without wanting to compare the two things too much, but is it take it slowly, get to know your body again, and just take your time to be out there running again?
Yeah, 100%. So right after birth, no exercise. Like I say, you are having to do some exercise like lifting the baby. Walking is fantastic. It's low impact. There's so many good benefits of that, and that will in many ways keep up your muscular strength and your aerobic strength in some ways. But when you do get the go ahead, both from your GP and potentially from something like a mummy MOT, which is a really good service, it does cost money, unfortunately, but I personally paid for it because I knew the value for me. But gradual introduction. So, potentially if you're used to, say, lifting weights, start maybe 50% of what you did previously, build up, and then gradually increase the frequency that you're doing the exercises, increase the duration of the exercise, and increase the intensity. So you're building up the strength. When it comes to running, I know a lot of women have done the Couch to 5K when they've come back from running, because it's a good way of building. And I pretty much expected I would need to do that. As it transpired, I started running kind of thinking, well, I won't do it officially for Couch to 5K, I'll run, and when it starts to feel bad, I'll walk and I'll continue. As it happened, because I'd been fortunate enough to be able to exercise throughout the pregnancy, I did a 25-minute run and it was great. But I didn't take my Garmin, I didn't care about the speed, and I took that pressure off me.
You mentioned kind of then about where you were before. So do you mind sort of telling people a little bit about your running journey and what kind of running you've done in the past?
Yeah, so I'm not a racer, so this is why the London Marathon is such a big thing for me. I've always shied away from races because I think for me exercise should be fun, and I really want to embrace that. And I've always kind of been nervous that something like a race will make it feel like a chore and take away the joy of running. And so prior to this, I did the Hampton Court half marathon as part of the initial 2020 training. And I once took part in the square mile relay race, which was a pretty unpleasant 8 minutes of my life at the time. But I do love running, and I got into exercise, I don't say relatively late, but as an adult. I didn't enjoy exercise at school. I started attending regular gym classes in my late 20s, and that's around the time that I started running socially and for my health. I qualified, as I mentioned before, as a fitness instructor, and I've been teaching classes in a lot of the gym chains, so places like Virgin Active, Nuffield, Fitness First. And after a little while of that, I wanted to look at ways that I could have a bit of entrepreneurship and a bit of creativeness with my fitness and the qualifications that I had. And I thought about, and I then did launch a running tour company. The name of the company was Love London Running Tours. It officially launched in spring 2015. And the concept of running tours, for people that aren't familiar, is you take people sightseeing and running. So it's known as sight running. It's become increasingly popular over the last few years. So most major cities now have at least one sight running company. I've certainly, since I launched the company, on my own travels, I've done running tours in Edinburgh, in Rome. I'm going to try and list them now so I don't miss people out. Melbourne, Venice, Vancouver and Kuala Lumpur. I've hosted quite a few running tour guides when they visited London. And I've got nice contacts with people who I haven't necessarily met, but I now have running tour companies in New York and St. Louis and other places. And so a bit like a bus tour or a cycle tour, the idea behind it is you run between the sites. You stop regularly, so you have an extended opportunity to talk about what you're seeing. And at that point, I can share anecdotes and stories and facts about the sites. Good chance to take pictures of the runners. And then you continue. So it's a nice way for people to fit in exercise, but also sightsee at the same time. Complete transparency at the moment, Love London Running Tours is on an indefinite hiatus. Firstly, when the pandemic hit, and then as a result of being pregnant and now kind of looking at, okay, how am I going to take it forward? But it's something that I've absolutely loved doing. Like, it's been amazing to meet people from all over the world and hear about their running histories. And yeah, I find it fascinating because I really thought a lot of the people that would be doing the tours would be kind of gap year, young Fitbits. And actually, it's been quite the opposite. The majority of the people doing the tours were 40s, 50s, 60s. A lot of people got into running quite late. Maybe they had a heart attack or something, and then they started to embrace their health journey. And they've done all the kinds of tours and sightseeing, and they're looking for something a little bit different.
You've mentioned it a couple of the times there about with yourself personally and with other people, and the number of people I speak to on this who are really, really serious runners now who are like, oh, I hate school.
Yeah.
I think there must be a whole load of people out there who loved running at school who don't run at all now because
exactly
the runners hated it at school. But with the tours, I think they're fantastic, and my wife Michelle did something on a much smaller level in Northampton, a little shoe run where they went around some of the sites in Northampton, and that's something she's still looking at making bigger now. But I'm fascinated in terms of sort of the older people that you did, and did you do all sorts of kind of different distances for different abilities? And because I guess the danger with that sort of running tour is you can have the difference between, you might have somebody turn up who can do 7-8 minute miles and then someone who can do 16-minute miles, and they're on the same tour.
Exactly. So starting with the kind of what the offerings were for the tours. So I offered group tours up to 8 people and private tours. So actually, a lot of people liked private tours. You'd get people that would therefore get a bespoke tour where they'd be picked up from their normally at the hotel, because most of the people doing it were visitors to London, and they have a route of their choice in terms of like distance wise, and I would then map out where we were going to see and what we do. And again, if you've got a private tour, you can have a little bit more say in terms of, well, you know what, Nikki, I'd really like to mainly run rather than stop so much, and we can chat about things as we're going along. I also did a couple of corporate tours, so they were kind of sometimes a little bit bigger because maybe they had 20 people from the company doing it. And in those instances, although my own personal insurance would allow me to run for up to 25 runners, it's really hard. I wouldn't even want to try and get them all across the road at the same time. So I would say, So I had a couple of other guides, other fitness instructors, and I would get them to help kind of with the group. And that also helped manage the paces of those times. But generally with the group runs, so the reason I capped it at 8 was for that reason, like trying to keep the group together, but also to make it a special experience for the runners. So you've got a chance to talk to each of them and make them feel valued and allow them to enjoy the tour. And I very much position the tours that we run at a comfortable conversational pace. We run at the pace of the slowest runner. And by having lots of stops, generally we only ran for maybe 2 minutes, 4 minutes between the different stops. So you never went on a massive run, and you certainly weren't speed running. Most of the time, people underestimate their fitness in that sense. So you get people who would maybe email me in advance to say, I'm a little bit worried. And they were always the people who were, very fit, had no problems getting around. The issues I did have, there were a few people who were not fit for the running. They were generally ones that came, not direct bookings, but ones that maybe came through third-party websites. And they were sort of more people who were interested in the kind of the Instagram moment of these awesome sights in their lovely running gear. But thankfully, it was never too much of a problem. It's just a way of just trying to tactfully find ways of just managing it. There was other understanding people on the tour. Thankfully, a lot of the time it was just one or two people, and you could maybe sometimes say, can I take you on a walking tour later today? There's ways around it, sometimes at my own expense in terms of my own time, but with it being my own business, I was very protective of keeping the reputation, and also just feeling responsible and wanting people to love that experience. I don't want to put anyone off and make them feel like they're unfit and they shouldn't be part of this community. And that maybe that comes from, again, the group fitness element, that you sometimes have your fitness room and you've got people who are complete maniacs in one corner and the shy person in the back that's terrified.
And I guess the danger could work both ways on that, because equally you don't want somebody who thought they were coming on a running tour to be basically end up having to do a walking tour in the short
absolutely so absolutely. And that's the thing, that's the other thing about keeping the groups. And also just in terms of the kind of health questionnaires and waivers that I would do with people, it was basically checking, are you, in your opinion, fit enough to run this distance? And so again, just with the tours, the standard tours that I did, they varied between 5 and 10 kilometers. They typically last around 2 hours because there was a lot of stops, so there was recovery times. That in itself is interesting though for people that aren't used to stopping. But again, for the fitness, because a lot of the gym classes, you do a couple of aerobic tracks and then maybe some toning, and then you start off again. Whereas if your body's not used to that, you might find by the end you're feeling pretty stiff.
Yeah, I know that when I sort of first started getting a little bit more serious about my running, I'd be very much headphones on, off I'd go on my own. I wouldn't stop at all. And when I started doing more chatty runs with groups, and we'd stop, even originally with me at kind of traffic lights, I'd be like, I hate this, I don't want to stop. Stiffening up, and I've kind of got used to it now, but I can understand that mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. But no, so I think it's just basically making people aware of what it is they're signing up for beforehand. And it is an independent business that I'm doing, so this is how my tours operate. You may have a totally different experience in a different city, because again, it's people's own entrepreneurial things. It's how they want to present their tours.
Yeah, and you've mentioned having experience of some of those tours in other cities.
Yeah,
quite a list there, so it sounds like you're well traveled with your running.
Yeah, I mean, some of them we just holidays that I was on. The Kuala Lumpur one I was on with my office job. I was on a work trip, and so again, like everyone else, I want to live by what I'm offering. So I got in touch, I booked a tour, and 6 a.m. there we were looking at the sites, and that was actually, like, for me, one of my favorite things about doing the tours, Sunday mornings and the 7 a.m. tours, because London is so quiet. Everybody else is having their massive buffet breakfasts. You can have these beautiful pictures in front of Tower Bridge with nobody else in the background, and it's just magical. And so the rest of the time when I walk around London now, I think, gosh, it's not the same as that. And it's a really nice way of, and I think as well for these places, it's a good way of running safely, because you don't have to worry about getting lost. You don't have to worry about going into a dodgy area, and you get to get a feel for where things are in relation to each other. And if you want to go back and say go into a museum later, you can. You see all these sites and you can go back and enjoy them. Yeah,
I mean, group running is it is such a useful way of getting out and staying safe. And obviously, I would never say to anybody that they shouldn't run on their own or at any time of the day. That people should be, when women should do that. However, running in a group or running on a tour or something like that is one way to increase your safety. So I really see some sort of benefits of it.
Yeah, and it's a lot more exciting than a treadmill run in a hotel, that's for sure.
100%. So you mentioned it's not happening at the moment. What are the plans to get the tours back again?
Yeah, well, I definitely want to offer them again, but I have to work out how, because right now with a 13-month-old, it's not feasible for me to be leaving the house at 6 a.m. to do tours. And we're also looking at relocating to get a house out of London. So it's not practical to be coming back in, but I have ideas of how I'd like to offer occasional tours at a more civilized hour. But again, probably focusing on things like Sundays, because I know that's an optimum time to enjoy the city. So it's finding the right time to come back. But the name is trademarked. I still have all my Instagram accounts and bits, and I'd love to come back to it. I really do enjoy it. It's just finding the right time for it. And I don't want to let people down. So I don't want to have somebody booked on a tour and not be able to do it because the baby's sick or anything else.
It sounds to me over the course of this conversation that what's going to happen is that 2023 or 2024
maybe
are going to be a massive year with marathons and relaunch of the tours.
Potentially, yeah. Oh my gosh, I really hope this is the marathon. Well, given it's my only deferral official allowance, I have to get round it.
Yeah, definitely. Will you be watching the marathon when it comes on the TV? Because I know some people who deferred are like, I can't stand it, I couldn't watch it. I was supposed to Great North Run, and I eventually watched it, but it was a strange feeling.
Yeah, I thought initially no, I thought it was going to be a little bit painful, but I think actually maybe we'll even go into London and support people. We're going out later with friends that day, so why not leave a little bit earlier and do the cheering, and then hope some of those people come back in April to cheer me.
Fantastic. Well, listen, I wish you the very best of luck with your training and with the marathon next year. I really hope the tours can come back on. Let us know if and when they do, and we'll try and give them a little bit of a push on our socials too. And basically, thank you very, very much for coming on Running Tales today.
Oh, thank you so much, Craig, for inviting me. I really enjoyed it.